I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, everybody, welcome to our little podcast that emanates here from West Point, Mississippi. In the Gamekeeper studio.
The Mecca.
Yeah, well, we're excited. There's just a lot going on in West Point right now.
It is a busy time of year right now. We got the foxhole shootout coming up, food plotting season, waiting on rain. Have you seen any rain in the forecast, Tox?
Just talk about something else.
I'm getting on his nerves already.
Yeah, well,
burn permits.
Well, we look
burn permits.
Look around the room. Toxie looks like he's dropped his sucker in the sand. We're looking over here. Max fact checking.
What?
Max gonna be fact checking us today. Lanny's got a big smile on his face.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I do
sir.
now. That was funny.
Dudley's got a smile on his face, and we've got Dr. Michael Chamberlain through the magic of the internet
in the house.
I think he's in Athens, Georgia.
I am.
And already bow hunting. Kind of jealous.
Yes. Yes. I already have a doe hanging. So.
Oh, man. Meat on the table. And that gets me fired up.
When did your season start, Mike?
This past Saturday.
Made quick work of it.
Yeah, he did.
You know, that first doe of bow season is always a benchmark. Yeah, for me.
It is. Well, I bet you have to move fast over there with the temperature like it is. Get the guts out of her, get her hung up.
Yeah, it was almost 90 Saturday. So thankfully, when she came out, it was pretty late. So she only laid there a few minutes before we were able to. It was time to climb down anyway and
slide in the bag.
Get her processed and get her hung in the cooler. But yeah, it's tough this time of year.
Well, Mike,
it's tough to enjoy it in some ways.
Yeah, I agree.
It's so hot, it's so humid, but it's time to hunt. So
Yeah, you mad at him? I know that.
Gotta go. My freezer's starting to get a little low, so I was seeing back straps as she approached. There's no question.
That's the one thing I can see.
Do you have any elk left from this time last year? You and I were in Colorado. You've killed a giant bull. You got any meat left?
I do. I don't have a lot of backstrap left. We've plowed through that pretty quickly. I think I have 5 or 6 packs left. But if you may not remember, but I made the tactical error of getting some sausages made, and then I just told Dave, the guy, just have them do the rest in burger. And that was a critical mistake.
Do you have to buy a new chest freezer?
Lots of burger.
Yes. I think I had 118 packs of burger, and we're down to about 80 now. So you kind of do the math. We've eaten a lot of elk burgers in the past year, but they're
good. It is
so
good.
It's so good.
Oh,
yeah,
so good.
Mike, how many times a week would you say you eat some kind of venison?
Oh, I'd say at least twice.
Yeah, average is good because.
Yeah, I'd say at least twice. Probably closer to 3 times a week. We consume venison in some form.
Lanny, what about you?
I think the Wallaces are about the same.
Yeah, I'm a 2.5 to 3 times a week on venison for sure.
Yeah.
Just made a big pot of venison meatballs this weekend. It was delicious. Still eating on those.
Hey, look, if grass-fed is the key to living a long life, I mean,
boom.
Can't get any more grass-fed than venison.
There's a video that by the time this podcast drops will be released, and it's the kind of the story of that hunt, the story of kind of your life in the last, I guess, 2 years, you would say, Mike. But I would encourage people to go watch that. It's called One Step at a Time, and Mossy Oak will be putting it out. It'll be all over the social medias there. It's very powerful.
It is.
I saw a comment from Mr. Bill Sugg, who was on the list, and he had just commented back. And Bobby had routed that to a few of us, and he said, in his opinion, the most kind of most powerful and meaningful and authentic thing that we may have ever done in 35 years. So I would echo that. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah, it was a interesting week in a lot of ways, for sure. I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you remember, Bobby, but it was miserably hot out there.
Yep.
And just the combination of just the physical, wear and tear of that hunt and the mental, emotional. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was just a truly, it was a one-time, once in a lifetime experience. And of course I got to fill that freezer up, which, like I said, I'll be eating elk meat for probably at least another year, if not more.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, that is a good thing.
That
It
is.
was, yeah.
Well, it's hard for all of us to talk about it, but I would highly encourage anybody to find it on the Mossy Oak socials. Maybe it'll be on the Mossy Oak Go app, but I think if you just type in One Step at a Time, you'll be able to find this thing and watch it. It's really good. It's about 20 minutes long.
There are things in place by Dr. Chamberlain and some more people supporting him that care a lot to do some really important things in Austin's name going forward. And so I would encourage people to
pay attention to
that coming.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
For sure.
Yeah, because it's
it's coming. It's coming.
And it's one thing I watch him do that in honor of his soulmate, just like he called it. But even if you park that on the side, these are really, for lack of a better word, cool and creative and very meaningful initiatives, and they're tailored because of what he says Austin would want. But at the same time, in today's world, it's stuff that can really make a difference from people that really would need that too. So more to come. You'll see stuff being done in honor of Austin. I just want to be sure and kind of earmark people when they see it, they know what we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Thank you for
sure. Yep.
So moving on. I just wanted to give a shout out. There's a guy that I have said from day one I would love to have him be on our podcast, Hank Williams Jr.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And he got married this past weekend.
Oh, wow.
And
really?
He did.
Well,
and
congratulations, Hank.
he got married at the Enon Baptist Church in Banks, Alabama, which is right where I grew up down in that part of the world. And that's why I kind of want to have him on as a guest at some point. Is I've all my life heard about this hunting property that he had down there below Montgomery, above Troy, that was just incredible. And I'm talking about this goes back 35 or 40 years.
He's trying to get another turkey hunting place.
He
isn't
is.
That's exactly
So,
what he's trying to do.
I got to be, I still could call him, but text him back and forth. And Kid Rock, he was doing the Mossy Oak piano and everything for a while there. But anyway, he had bought his place bordering Hanks.
Yeah.
And asked us to send Mossy Oak. He did the vinyl around two entire trailers. And did the vinyl Mossy Oak around the whole
he lives
entire.
He got
a double wide.
A Mossy Oak double wide, yeah.
That's like what TK and Mike said. When you duct tape two singles together, it makes it a double wide.
Yeah, I was flipping through the wedding photos, and one of Hank's trucks is completely covered in our camo as well.
How about that?
Yes, sir.
Well, I would, I know we all would love to have him as a guest. So
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
Maybe
We
one
got
day.
something to hope
Are you
for.
calling him out, Bobby?
I'm not calling him out.
Oh,
I'd
both
be
Cephas.
careful. He probably doesn't appreciate you being called out.
No,
like
I'm
that.
not calling him out. I'm inviting him.
There you go.
I'm inviting him.
All right.
And we'll come to you, Hank.
That's great. Another one of my musician friends not friends. I wish he'd be my friend.
Acquaintances.
I follow him as Billy Strings, a.k.a. William Apostle. He got married this weekend as well.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
congrats.
He's been wearing
If
some of those
anybody
bottom-land
haven't-
pants.
Yeah, if you hadn't ever watched him and his group,
He's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, Michael, I want to tell you, because you probably hadn't heard this, and the rest of our listeners now, the LS Bottomland Camo Tractor is out there.
Gonna be on the scene. I can't wait to get ours.
Can you believe it? A Mossy Oak Camo Bottomland Tractor.
And there's going to be one at LS dealers across the country.
Yeah.
It is slick.
It is slick.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
That's
great
pretty cool.
size,
Yeah.
beefy little tractor. It's going to be awesome.
There,
So,
I've gotten my teeth into them a little bit more because when
Yes,
I
you
first
have.
got here, there wasn't as much work what I have time to do, and so I've used them some and listened to everybody, but I've extensively in the last month, and they're just amazing. They're great. They are great. And I've had a lot of different tractors and brands too. They are great. Really proud of that relationship. They're great folks to work with, which helps a lot, but that's a great piece of equipment for people. Really, and they're not a lot around in the South, and a lot of dealers yet that's growing, but pay attention and go check them out is all I'm saying, just for your own sake if you're looking at tractors.
Yeah, we went on a little road trip last weekend, and I drove by a dealership about an hour north of here, actually, and we pulled into the lot and looked at them. Man, it was a good feeling.
Was that Murphy Brothers?
Maybe so.
Yeah, it was. I've been up there before too. Great.
Yeah.
I tell you what, talk about in the South.
How deer will sit there and watch you on a tractor, you know, as you go
It's
by.
crazy.
It is crazy. They know you're
now
doing
you're taking it to a whole nother level now. Because
But you know, if anything you hit the brakes, you know,
yeah.
I've had coyotes just walk out in the field with me bush hogging or doing something and just sat there and watch.
Just leave it
And
running.
I was like, okay, and then you start carrying a rifle or something in the tractor cab with you, or even a shotgun with buckshot or something. But when you come to a halt, they're gone.
Oh no, yeah, they're out of there.
I mean, that's a technique a lot of folks use. Is they'll get their buddy to drive them to the stand in the tractor and turn around and come back.
So funny story on that line. When we bought our first property ever, y'all know, we call it Chamberlain. It's in Alabama. It's our family headquarters now, and a very special place. So that was in 1990, a long time ago. So it's 33 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was an old, probably looks like about a 50-horse Ford tractor that had broken down, and was just like, the tires were gone on one side, the other was just like a piece of shriveled up rubber. It'd been there forever, but it was clear that Ford tractor. And for the first 5 to 10 years, when somebody hunted, there's a long strip of a field, we called it the Ford tractor field.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they got in the old seat, and we had just one piece we'd put up there, the proper rifle on. So we hunted, quite a few deer were killed from a Ford tractor seat. Because they paid no attention to it. It'd been there forever.
Yeah. How about that? Well, Mike, we're excited about the Camo LS tractor, as you can see. So we need to get one over there where you could get a chance to plow some plots with it. So speaking of it, have you got are y'all getting the rain that you need this year in Georgia for your food plots?
Not really. I mean, we've had rain this summer, but it's been in the form of really severe thunderstorms. We've had a lot of wind events, a lot of trees down. We're dry. I mean, we're like a lot of places. We really need a shot, of water here soon. I mean, we're not in a position where we could plant. I mean, kind of like you are. I mean, we've mowed and sprayed, and plots are burned down, and everything's ready to go. But it's pointless to break ground right now.
Exactly.
Just kind of
That's honestly
waiting.
where we are. They're getting rain today, say a little south of Chamberlain, which is going to give them there's some soil moisture, but it's so dry on the top layer now. I mean, you couldn't even get it to work Dudley's version with a heavy dew right now. But it's just we missed. There's, I guess, some low spots, but the tough part is if you plant in a spot that's maybe got enough soil moisture now in our part of the world, it's going to be underwater in the winter, so you're wasting your money.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah. A lot of the stuff around here, you try to drop a disc, it'll just kind of bounce around on the surface.
Yep.
Yep. All right, guys. So let's turn around and get focused. Let's look at Mike. Mike, I'm counting on you to jump in here too. Richie, don't fall asleep on us over there. Please pay attention. But speaking of, you know what? I digress. I needed to go back. Did you know we have a guy here in the office that killed an alligator last week?
No.
I did know that. That's right.
I didn't.
Old
Richie,
Gator Hunter Davenport.
Richie, how big was this gator you pulled in the boat?
It was a mammoth. Now I thought we already talked about this.
No, we that one
We didn't get the
make
full
it.
story.
Yeah.
It is full story.
What was the length on that gator?
So he was a whopping 4'2".
There you go. Right in the slot.
Can you make a belt out of that, or a watch band, or what's that?
I'm just wondering if you could just do the whole thing, mount the whole thing, and use it for a
we-
bass lure or something.
We're getting the full mount. We're getting everything.
There you
Yeah,
go.
Yeah. Hey.
Hey, the
so,
point was he's in the boat.
Hey, I did not eat a tag.
That's
so
right.
That's the point.
That's
So,
true. No tag sandwich for Richie.
And so the idea is you don't pass up what you on the first day, what you'll shoot on the last day, right?
Yeah.
Is that the saying? I don't know.
One in the
That's
hands
a
better
trip.
than one in the bush.
That's a trip saying that's very famous. If you see a deer, especially whatever elk, on the very first day, and you're thinking, "Oh, this is borderline what I shoot or not," and tell yourself, "If I was fixing to leave, like he can relate to that. If I'm fixing to leave, would I shoot that? Yeah, just go ahead and shoot it. That's kind of the old saying, because you will regret it.
I don't ever have the problem.
If you pass the
Like, trust your outfitter. Same thing.
Yeah, don't
Trust your
guide the
outfitter.
guide.
Laney's really particular about shooting. It's got to have hair on it before
Yeah,
he'll
that's
pull
right.
the trigger.
Before I even think about it, it's got to
Yeah,
have
it's
some
got to
hair.
have hair on it first.
Well, Richie, congratulations.
Yeah.
4'2".
Yeah, we had some gator nuggets over the weekend watching the state game.
Oh,
so
nice.
had a little appetizer there.
That's
so
fun. That's fun.
so
Well, good for you, Richie.
It worked out well.
We appreciate the invite.
Yeah, well, actually, you were invited. Don't say you
At
weren't.
the last minute.
That's why he didn't kill a big one.
You were invited, but so that's why I had to rent a boat. So
All right. Well, let's turn around. Let's look at Mike. Mike, I want to today. I'd like to figure out how we can kind of carve this conversation into. You're in several hunting clubs, and how do you manage all the guys so that they're on the same page with the management plan? How do you keep them all from wanting, if you identify a shooter buck, how do you keep them all from wanting to hunt that area? And I'd also like to find out how you use food plots to help manage your property for deer and turkey. And just kind of get in your head about how you manage for deer hunting. Because people know you as the turkey doc, but you may be madder at the deer than anything else.
I am.
Yeah, I'm glad you prefaced it with that. I mean, he is a deer nut for sure.
Yeah, I get pretty mad at him. That's for sure. It's been several years since I got really mad, but I'm mad this year. I've got a few that are big enough to warrant attention and some serious attention. So I'm getting pretty fussy at them right out of the box this year. So I'm looking forward to it.
I feel like it's early in the season, and I'm getting a pregame speech from a football coach. He's making me want to go get after it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people, like I'm probably one of these people. I can grow the heck out of a big deer, but I still struggle to kill the big deer.
Or ever see him again once.
Once his velvet falls off down here, it's over with.
Mike over here can grow them and get them into bow range, and that's a really big feat that a lot of people don't have that trait. So we want to learn from you today.
I'll do what I can. I think in some ways, my dad used to tell me there's no such thing as luck. You kind of create your own luck. But I think there is such a thing as luck. But I do think I think what's helped me through the years is in very few instances am I willing to make a hunt where I think there's a chance I'm making a mistake. I would rather sit out. I'd rather sit in a stand or an area that I have absolutely no intel on, no hope whatsoever, than go into one of my prime spots and make a mistake. And I think that works through time if you're willing to be patient and not step into a situation where you think it's iffy. Eventually, I think your day comes.
And I'm going to just assume that probably that first thing on your list of potential mistakes is that first thing is you're watching the wind.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I also think I think we get in trouble when we don't factor in our approach relative to the wind in addition to the actual hunt itself with the wind. So I'm usually really careful about the wind needs to be pretty much spot on before I'm going to go into a set and hunt it. And I try to think carefully about how I'm getting there too, and whether there's a chance the wind is going to undermine me while I'm getting there. That's kind of the way I look at it. With a rifle, I mean, it's a little bit different. I mean,
yes,
you've got a little bit, obviously you have a little more flexibility, but but I still try to use that kind of super cautious approach when it comes to, where am I going to go sit, but how am I going to get there as well?
And that can be tough in the South,
Yes.
because,
Yeah, it can.
we have so much habitat, AKA cover, everywhere you look, but you may go to the Midwest and everything is patchy and all the cover is in the drainages and stuff.
Well, the other thing is southeast doesn't mean southeast.
Right.
Let's go. Okay, we're southeast. I got a travel corridor. Everything's right. I'm going to hunt it this morning. And then you get in there an hour before daylight or whatever. Maybe some people are like him, maybe even earlier or whatever. And all of a sudden you sit there and the thermals are the exact opposite. The wind hadn't started. The sun hadn't hit. In these certain areas, I always equate it to like certain areas the air sinks and pulls to it, or it rises and pulls air to it one way or the other. But I've had that happen so many times, like early in the morning or when it dies, or late in the afternoon. It says, if you don't do your homework and it says southeast, if it's, you get another forecast. If it says what are the three most feared words in the English language for deer hunters? Light and variable.
Yeah.
So that's my thing is southeast might not be southeast. And so some places the wind swirls a lot more than others. It is, I'd like, to his point, the number one thing I would say. And then only that is like, is your wind blowing into the thicket they're living in that you already know they're living in as you walk to the stand or something,
Right.
So you gotta, the guys like him that really are successful are anal, for lack of a better word, about the details, especially of scent more than anything.
Yeah. Getting in and getting out.
When I'm standing there thinking, okay, I could hang a lock on there, or I could put a stand there, or I could do whatever. I'll scent check. I'll take my powder and I'll start. Just okay. It's supposed to be east northeast at 8 today, and okay, how is it blowing at this particular location? Because I've hunted some places. In fact, to Toxie's point, one of my favorite stands on the property right here near my house. I don't hunt it often. And the reason it's one of my favorite stands is I killed a really nice deer there a number of years ago, but the wind is really temperamental. It's on a point, a hardwood, kind of a large thing, super large diameter pines, open, fire maintained, and then you transition down into these mesic hardwoods. It's at a point. It's a funnel. You get a lot of deer movement through there, a lot of acorns on the ground in most years, and deer just naturally move through there. But because of the terrain and the topography, there's this constant back and forth of the wind, whether it's in the morning, in the afternoon. You get these constant thermals, you get swirls, and it only takes you going in there to hunt it one time to see it with your own eyes. You'll have deer that you think are money. This deer is going to walk right by me, and they get 60 yards out, and they don't spook, but they realize something is not quite right. And the gig's up at that point, particularly for bow hunting. And I really love to hunt that stand, but I bet I don't hunt that stand more than once or twice a year, and it's usually the day after a weather change where the winds are super consistent.
Yep.
Like we've been in 2 days of east northeast or east southeast or whatever, not, hey, a front's coming, it's supposed to be northwest and then southeast tomorrow morning, that type of thing. I'll stay out of stands like that. If there's even a chance the wind could kind of booger me up there.
I've got a spot very similar. It's got to have that. It's so thermally, for lack of a better term, thermally, that you have to have a hard, the front comes through and you get that hard northwest wind. And that's really the only time you can hunt it, is because it pushes the thermals out. You go the next day when it starts calming down and you're just going to get snorted at.
Moultrie has pioneered the game management category. Today, Moultrie is one of the best-selling brands of feeders and seeders in the world, and they continue to innovate with new technology that gamekeepers will rely on. Moultrie products are always field-tested and designed for hunters by hunters, combining forward-thinking innovation with time-tested practicality. Moultrie, first in feeders since 1979. So, Mike, are y'all on these properties? Do you feel like you get the majority of the bucks on camera every year, and you can analyze and put together a hit list, or have you ever determined a percentage of bucks you don't think you have a picture of?
Yeah. So I've been one of the properties that I hunt a lot, a camp that I've belonged to in Louisiana for many, many years. You know, we run a preseason survey every year, which I'm a absolute fanatic about, is that survey instrument. And through the years, you know, we run that in October, which is super early over there. You know, it's still hot. Deer aren't moving a lot. So we miss deer, and we know that we do. So we'll run cameras on into the season. And through the years, I just kind of have kept a running tally. It's about 20% that we missed, that bucks that will show up. Now, I'm not talking spikes and 4 points. You know, I'm talking 3+ year old deer that I can identify, that are fairly distinctive, that we miss about 20%. So we'll add, you know, if we've got 100 deer on our list, you know, we'll add another 20, say Thanksgiving to mid-December, you know, when they're starting to feel a little more frisky and things are changing. And I think what happens is, you know, you put these preseason surveys together and it's warm, and you got to understand deer, their home ranges are very, very small, relatively speaking, during the late summer. And so you drop a camera out, and you may not be that far from the core area of a buck, and you never get a picture of him because he's just not moving. And I think that's kind of what's at play. I've even run cameras inside of, for instance, and, you know, I'll be judged, that's fine. But I've run camera surveys for clients and others inside of, you know, high fences, and you still miss deer. You still miss animals even in a high fence. And again, I just think it's at certain times of the year, which, like right now, I'm running a survey on a property right now, the one near my house, and I know I'm going to miss deer because it's hot. They're just not moving, and that's okay. You know, we'll come back and we'll supplement it in a month or two and go from there.
A couple of great lessons from what he just put out too. I think the biggest one is for everybody out there in the age of the camera, which some ways I almost hate it, because you know, I used to get up there and think as one of our former employees would say, Kahuna was going to walk out at any time, you know, because of the mystery of the whitetail, the big whitetail. But his point was, and I've for sure factually proven this, deer really, really do migrate, especially older deer that have understood and followed other deer that, you know, like the deer always woke me
Jordan's
up.
deer.
Jordan's deer.
Yeah.
There was a property we had right by, it's gone now. They cut all of it and we don't have it, but it had a huge stand of swamp chestnut white oak. Just the forester would never cut that over a couple of generations. I say a generation for that cutting was 10 or 12 years of select cutting hardwoods every 10 or 12. Anyway, it was just like this forest of the preferred deer acre there is on the planet. And he killed this deer. Well, it just happened that Daddy has a farm about 1.5 miles or more from there, all the way across the creek bottom back towards Starkville. And we had pictures of the exact same deer all summer up until about 2 weeks before he killed him. And he migrated when those acorns started falling. And so I've noticed that even out where our place is north of town here too, deer that, I say, for example, our neighbor hunts within 1 mile to 1.5 miles, and I've never seen a deer that he's killed and sent me a picture of. And he doesn't shoot many because he's very selective, that we didn't have on camera consistently all summer long. But he has a bunch of big hardwoods and a lot of mast. And so another one is a deer that was raised and consistently probably about 3 miles from there. And then he was seen quite a bit, again, 3 miles from where he spent all his summer. So they move, and I think the older deer move. But the second point is don't give up, like in anything. So you don't have a deer on your place, don't pull all your cameras. If that's somewhere you still like to hunt and all, deer are gonna move. I mean, a lot of people read the stories or something's in the paper or magazine, and someone's killed this giant deer, and it's like, oh my gosh, I hadn't seen him in almost a year, and then he showed up on a camera. And a lot of times they'll just be in an area for a couple of days. Maybe it's because they followed a doe there during the rut and hung out there and found something to eat, and they went back to their home ground later. But having that on the spot today, with it's even been outlawed in some areas, but on the spot, send it to your cell phone technology can really help you if something changes. So don't give up, just because you hadn't seen one. And flip side of that is, if you've got seasons open and you've got the right conditions and you better take advantage of it, or they will move. Opposite of that, they'll leave you.
One thing that drives me nuts, and one of my guys, the guys that hunts with me, said this a few years ago, and I really chastised him, actually, and he's a hell of a good deer hunter.
You chastised him?
I did, because he said, quote, I said something, why don't you go sit wherever it was? And we were all deciding, where are we going to hunt? And on this property, we're very cordial with each other. We, if we're all on the same page, and when we talk about how that happened, but when it's time to decide who goes and sits where, we have an open, frank discussion every afternoon about, well, where are you going? Well, I was thinking about going here. Well, I was also thinking about going there. Well, you go. That's fine. No problem. I'll hunt in the stand beside you, or whatever it is.
That's when our group's a little different than your group right there. We kind of merged right where you went straight ahead right there.
I was thinking the same thing.
This particular day, my buddy said, I said, why don't you go wherever it was? I don't remember where it was. And he goes, hey, there's nothing there. And what he was saying was there were no pictures there, and, no pics of bucks there. And I looked at him and I said, you got to be kidding me. We've got a northwest wind, one of the best winds you could have on this property. Go hunt, get your tail in the stand.
Yep. You're dead on too. 100%.
I killed a room full of bucks that are hung on the wall before I ever looked at a trail camera picture. And I really think in some ways we've gone so far down the road of, if I don't have the intel, I'm not going to go hunt. And that's absurd. I mean, if the weather conditions are right, go sit, go get there. And I mean, what's the worst thing that you could do? Have a wonderful, blessed afternoon sitting in God's creations, seeing nothing. I mean, that's still better than what I'm doing right after we finish with this podcast.
Careful, you almost said right what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, it could be worse. Yeah. No,
depends on if you've got the window down right now or not.
Yeah. I can remember one afternoon that, and this is an honest story. I showed up late. I was by myself, grabbed a gun. I was wearing a button-up shirt because I had been visiting a client. I had no camouflage on. I had khakis. I put my rubber boots on.
That's a problem right there, Mike.
No, it's like it just tells you miracles do happen.
Ran to the stand, and we needed to shoot does on this property. We were way behind on our doe kill. The opening weekend, the weather was terrible. We had only killed a handful. And so the first doe that walks out, I shoot her. And I text one of the guys that works up there, used to, and I said, do we need a camp deer for meat? And he said, yeah, we do. And I said, okay, good. I just shot a doe. He said, well, I'll come help you after dark. So a little while later, another doe comes out, and I shoot her. And I texted him again, and I said, do we need another deer? Yep, I've got a buddy that'll take one. I said, perfect. He said, I'll see you after dark. And about 10 minutes after that, a 150-inch 8-point walks out. I shot him, and I'm sitting there in khakis with a nice button-up shirt on, no hat, no nothing. And I went to this stand because I thought, there's really nothing I can screw up here. The wind's perfect for it. I never hunt this stand, ever. I can count the number of times in 25 years I've hunted the stand on one hand. But you know what? The wind was perfect. I had no intel. I had no idea what was there. And one of the nicer 8-points I've seen comes out and I shoot him. I mean,
It's a big 8
go get in
point.
the stand.
Yeah.
Giant 8.
What do you call that?
A real 8.
A real 8.
A real 8. My Uncle Bud would say that's a real 8.
That's a real 8
So,
right there.
Mike, how do you guys decide who's going to go where? Y'all really just talk it out? You don't draw cards or?
Bobby's so amazed y'all don't fight about horns
Yeah.
and
Or,
antlers.
hey, I really
and
am.
antlers. I mean, Bobby is, oh
Well,
my gosh.
I like the talking out. I like the talking it out because when you draw cards and somebody makes a decision that, they may not be quite as knowledgeable or they may not worry about the wind as much, they may pick a spot that's going to get boogered up. So being able to communicate with people.
It took us time in that group because, we had our years where we all were selfish.
I
and
bet.
we all wanted to kill big deer and it took it. We had our learning curves. I mean, we had situations where feelings got hurt and then suddenly I think collectively we all realized that, what, we're all going to put animals on the wall if that's our objective. Our management program was so successful and it was so obvious to everybody that hunted there that, okay, there's 40 bucks on the shoot list this year. And that's not an exaggeration. I mean, we've had years where we have, 40, 50 shooters on this property. And
Wow.
when you've got that volume of animals and they're high quality, I mean, some are obviously much bigger than others. I mean, we shoot based on age, but I think everybody just realized through time that, what, it's not worth getting upset with one another. It's not worth ruining a friendship. It's a deer. I mean, it's a deer. And at the end of the day, I think everyone looked around on their own den wall and thought, what's really important is the process here that it took for us to get here. I mean, being part of a process, being part of the project, we shared in each other's successes, and we still do. And when you get to that point where you're not selfish anymore, you realize that if your buddy kills a deer that's super nice, you've had the same. I mean, you've enjoyed your afternoon. You go and sit and if you bide your time, I know if I hunt on that property, I'm going to kill a nice buck every year. I know I am. So I'm not worried about it anymore. And if I don't, you know what? It's not that big of a deal to me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me time to get there. And there are some people that know me very, very well that could tell you, yeah, Mike 10 years ago wasn't Mike today.
Right.
But
It
it
happens.
happened.
That's
and
right.
Talking it out works for us.
It's
It
just
really
cool to know that you grew that on your own place
it
with
is.
your friends, and they can send you a photo and you can look at it and say, we did that.
Well,
not
it kind
as
of makes
much
me
I did.
proud of the gamekeeper process that we've been walking down the road, talking to the world about and look, not that we all get along about everything, and that's what I was going to comment. Like, there's just some people that everybody's proud for them when they take one, regardless, turkey, deer, whatever. And there's just some people that go, oh my gosh, did he get one?
Yeah.
It's just human nature and all. But I was getting to the most fun of all is doing the work on the place and managing the place and seeing the results in the wildlife. It's just magical to know that you actually did that. And so it becomes the centerpiece over just the killing. Of course, you still like going and shooting stuff, but it helps.
question.
It's no question that game, that's one to brag on the old gamekeeper process, because I think it's kind of shining a light on how we get down the road. And it's a lot more than, we're going to help you get better animals and better hunting, but it's a better enjoyment of the whole life, that you get out of it.
Well, he
I
hit the
think
nail on
one
the head
thing,
with the
too,
word
that-
selfless,
Yeah, I think one thing too that helps in groups like we're talking about, whether it's 3 guys and gals or whether it's 10 or 15 or whatever, is if you have people that are involved that are passionate about the process, but they're self-deprecating, they are
Yes.
modest, they are willing to bend, then the others that are around see that. and they see that there are people within their group that truly do have the mindset that this is us. It's
Exactly. Well, think about it. Everybody's involved in the process of the management process. It's, maybe, and again, maybe somebody, you have a lease, someone else does all the work, tells you what you can shoot or not shoot, whatever. But most cases today, everybody involved in hunting on a place wants to have some say-so, do some work, have a hand in it. And you think about it now, everything you take, they have a hand in, and they can say, hey, we got this place. We all work together on it. Oh my gosh, we got, and they're talking like a gamekeeper. And it's like, do you know we killed like 4 deer over 170 this year, or we killed 5 deer over 150 and 2 160? Whatever the group does, they can feel like they have a part of that, and it does create a team spirit, to the whole process, as opposed to every man, every dog for himself or whatever.
Dudley, you had a question?
Yeah, I want to learn more about your techniques for keeping the pressure down that you and your buddies utilize. I know, different hunting camps, different regions have different ways of keeping pressure at bay. And I know I've noticed one thing is you guys seem to be really good at getting these mature bucks to come out into food plots during daylight. What are some tips you can offer our listeners for that?
So one thing that I get asked, and this is a related question, Dudley, is, okay, so do you just sit out of these plots, until it's time for bucks to start moving? No. We'll routinely go in early in the season and shoot our does over plots. I'm not concerned about it. I do try to, if I have the say, and of course I don't always have the say, but when I do have the say, it's we're going to lay out of some areas. We're going to get our does shot early, and then we're going to chill out a little bit. We're going to let things settle down. We're not going to drive around the property willy-nilly. We're not going to go grab a beer and take a ride. We're going to be as quiet and inconspicuous as possible all of the time. And the other thing that I'm a firm believer in is completely sitting places out and not hunting them until it's go time. And I have the property right here near my house. There's a number of food plots. They're all good. A buck could walk across any one of them at any time, but there are just a few that through the years are just better. They're just destination plots. They end up getting bucks that show up at 4:00 in the afternoon. And there's some, they show up at 5:10 if they're going to show up. So we really lay out of those 4:00 plots until the wind's perfect. It hasn't been hunted in 2 weeks. Let's go make one hunt. And this is God's honest truth. This is a small group of guys that hunt this place. I don't care who hunts it. Somebody needs to go hunt that plot, and you got one shot. Friday afternoon, or let's just say Friday afternoons, you one shot. It hasn't been hunted in a couple of weeks. Let's go make this happen. Somebody get in there quietly and do not climb down. I will come get you after dark in a bike or other, vehicle.
Yes, big time.
Don't climb down. And that's another thing that I'm a absolute fanatic about. I do not want to climb down if I even have a hint that there's an animal anywhere around me. So if I'm the one that's in that money spot, I'm arranging for somebody to come get me. And if I don't have that option, and my wife will confirm this, she thinks it's absolutely insanity. I have sat in stands until hours after dark, just sitting there.
Wait till they clear.
Well, you think about it, so smart is that it's just take an example where just, don't get out of a stand and leave in the evening around food source, food plot, unless, there's going to be deer there if you see them or not. Okay, The food plot's empty. I can get out of here. The only way to clear the area out is for someone to drive through there.
Yeah.
So, it's just
Think about how many times you've sat there, and I'm guilty of this. I've done this, and as I was doing it, I was like, "Don't do this! Don't do this! Don't do this!"
Yep.
A doe, 2 does and 3 fawns were out. It's getting late. They meander off. You give them about 4 or 5 minutes, and you climb down. Don't do it.
It is crazy how quickly, if you bust deer from a bow stand and then continue to hunt it through the year, and I can't prove anything, but it's like they start to avoid it. They know exactly what your effective range is, and you can still see deer traveling, but all of a sudden they have changed.
Yep. Last year, perfect story to show that point, Toxie. Last year, I went to my camp. I wanted to bow hunt. This is rifle season now, but I'd already bow hunt. I'd shot a deer with, actually first deer I killed with Austin's bow I shot last year.
Wow.
And I wanted to keep bow hunting. I wanted to keep shooting deer with that bow. So I asked one of my buddies that was there, I was like, "Hey, where are those ground blinds you got set up?" And he told me where one of them was. And that's perfect for a southeast wind. So I hustled in there, got in there plenty early. And here comes a doe and a fawn. And that doe from 100 yards looks at that ground blind, and she wouldn't come anywhere near it. And I texted him right then. I said, "Who was the last person that hunted this blind?" And he said, I'm not exactly sure. I said, "Well, whoever it was busted this deer because she knows something's wrong." And it's so obvious when you do it. They learn right out of the box that there's something wrong there. Don't go over. She was all over that food plot. If I'd have had a rifle, I could have smoked her, but she was not going to come to that 22-yard mark. There's just no question. She was not doing it.
Mac, you look like you got something you want to ask.
I do, Dr. Mike. How you doing?
Good, Mac. How about you?
Oh, doing well. So I recently got into a club, and so I'm really trying to figure it out. And the camera survey is interesting to me because we've been talking about doing that. So how long do you leave, say, the cameras up to have a good survey? And then are you moving cameras around to different areas? And what areas, I guess, are you looking to put cameras in?
I mean, it really depends on the scenario. Usually what I'll do is, for a client, for instance, is if there are areas where they've already, they have plots, or they already have feeders, or they already have locations where animals are used to coming to a location, I'll usually start there. I'm not a big camera move guy. I tend to be one. I mean, if you think about it, in a lot of ways, a camera survey is a snapshot. I kind of look at it as, I know I'm going to miss a group of animals like we talked about. What I really want to understand is my buck to doe ratio, and I want to understand who my, for instance, right here in September in Georgia, whoever I'm getting on camera right now is pretty much a homebody. They're right there. Okay, well, these are the bucks I know I have. And like we talked about, if I can come back and supplement that later, I will. But I'm just trying to get kind of a minimum at this point. Okay, here are the bucks that I know are homebodies. They're right here. Hopefully, if I get multiple pictures of the same animals on different cameras so that I know I get some sense of their range at this point, where they're more likely to show up than other locations. That's just kind of the way I do it, Mac. I don't try to get an exhaustive list. And I also think sometimes we make mistakes when we just keep going into areas and putting cameras and putting feet on the ground, or just putting, random cameras up. We're putting our scent. We're traveling in there. We're going, and we're constant. And even if you're using cell cameras, you have this constant activity. And I think that can be problematic.
It's hard to do it to the degree he does. That's one reason they're so successful. But one little rule of thumb that I've always said, I believe, mirrors this. At least it's the simple things like don't go put a camera in a morning spot in the morning, and don't hang morning spots in the morning. You know, for the most part, if you got to violate them and you're a early in the morning, late in the afternoon hunter, do it in the middle of the day. Even worse than that is do not go put a camera or hang a stand or do some work at a food source place in the evening. Don't do it. I mean, it's just, that's not that hard to do. That to the degree of discipline he has is tough.
And I might be completely wrong, but you can't convince me that bumping a doe out of a stand isn't a problem.
Oh, of course.
I mean,
it is. Yeah.
that is just, you know, like this, we were talking off, off camera, if you will, about my hunt this morning and what a fiasco it was. You know, I ended up bumping a buck, which I'm not happy about, but he's a youngster. At the end of the day, I truly couldn't help doing it. I had no idea that he was still there. He had been there forever. And as I'm climbing down, realizing that, okay, I just educated this youngster, it was so frustrating to me. It's like, is that going to come back to haunt me? I don't know. What I do know is if you bump a doe out of a stand, it's going to come back to haunt you.
Especially an old one.
When she starts blowing and if you can't prevent it, fine. But if you could have prevented it, then that's on you. That's kind of the way I look at it.
That's really interesting.
Don't underestimate them. I mean, you hear people talking about, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. I mean, all this stuff. And I was like, why take a chance? You get so little time after all this work and money and time, and we love it so much. It's like the details he's talking about. Why take a chance, you know?
Well, you spook that doe, she's going to continue to be wary. Well, that mature buck may be 80 yards away in a thicket, looking at her mannerisms, 2 afternoons later. He may decide not to come out if she looks a little spooked.
Those old does do not forget.
And if you move her off the plot and she stops coming to that, she's weary. Well, if he's following her a month later.
Well, what I find is once you've bumped them the one time, in most cases, I mean, every terrain is different. They'll end up where they will not approach the food plot except downwind. They just won't do it. So instead of her just, being comfortable coming on out there and doing her thing, which you're only going to get one if they're pretty much downwind unless it's a miracle. If they've been the pressure, they'll start to, by and large, and the bucks often will just circle the whole thing first,
Mike, let's go back. You said that y'all's club that you're looking at, you're judging well, Lanny, I was coming to you, but you didn't look like you had a question there.
I appreciate that.
It's so rare that Lanny asks a question. Let me forego where I was going here. Let's go to Lanny.
Well, y'all brought up my favorite subject, which is does, obviously. So you touched on this a little bit, but do y'all have a strategy for harvesting does? Because I know you're like us in the South. It's a very important part of our program to harvest for us as many does as possible. Do you have timing or any kind of tips you could give us about what's best about that?
Yeah, my philosophy has always been early and often. I try to get the bulk of the doe harvest completed well before the rut in whatever area I'm hunting. That can be a grind in some places, like it is here at my house. We have about 5 weeks, and it's mostly 5 to 6 weeks, and it's almost all archery hunting to get our does shot before the rifle opener, and the rifle opener is followed very quickly by the rut. So that makes it a grind, which is why I was in a stand this morning before work. We're trying to get these does shot because I've never understood the notion of let them be bred, let them eat all fall and then kill them. That really doesn't make any sense to me biologically. So yeah, my target usually is I want 50% of my doe harvest shot, done within the first few weeks of the season. If I can do that, and on some properties that obviously that can be a challenge. If your doe target is say 50 animals or more in some cases, then that can be that can be a lot
A
of
lot of
work.
work. That's right.
But I
Yeah.
think it's important. And that also allows you get those animals out of there, you free up those resources. You can then ratchet the pressure back a little bit, let things settle down, and then you're not, one, you're freeing up resources, but two, you're not allowing does to occupy a buck's mind and his energy and then turning right around and shooting her.
Gotcha. Early and often.
You're going to have a lot better rut too,
Yeah.
or a lot of better hunting
Should be more
in
intense.
the rut.
Yeah, higher competition.
No question about that one too.
You know, Mike, it seems like, and it seems like most people don't shoot as many does as they need to. And I know you can't make a blanket statement across the country because deer herds are in different, or, peaks and valleys here and there. But do you hear that, or do you sense that people just don't shoot enough does?
Yes. That's a very, very common problem that I see, and I see it with my own clients. When you tell somebody that they need to kill, let's say 50, when you think 50, that's like, okay, that's a lot of animals. Well, when you start actually killing 50 and you realize what goes into doing that and how much work it is, I think people quickly get what I call doe fatigue, and they get tired and they get frustrated. And it's like, every time I show up here, I'm cleaning deer, I'm taking deer to processors, and they back off. They take their foot off the throttle, and that's a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people, if you've got a high deer density, and research has shown this, generally about a 30% doe harvest will allow you to reduce density. Somewhere in that 15 to 20% will usually allow you to kind of get by from year to year and sustain those numbers. And then when you get down lower than that, your herd should be expanding. So if you just kind of think about it, if you're hunting a property that has what you think is a super high deer density, you got a lot of deer, and your biologist or your manager or whoever's working with you says, hey buddy, we need to kill 30 does. Well, if 30 is 15%, think about it. I mean, that's just knocking the top off,
right,
if you will. So yeah, doe kill can be problematic.
Lanny, have you ever had doe fatigue?
I've never had that. Must be genetic or something.
It does point out one of the things to cultivate if you're intensively managing like you are is a list of very trusted friends, because that way you could bring, instead of just you and the people in the club only having a monumental task of shooting all those does and doing all that, if you have, then you could actually have like doe day or two, bring in, if they're trusted friends that'll do the right thing. And I haven't been able to do a good job of this, but some of including you, the best successes I've seen was where they had the intention of taking all their mouths off. I can think of 3 or 4 I know of. One of them even had a doe weekend. It was like a ladies hunt weekend. They entertained a bunch of people, had guests and whatever, put all these people on stands, and their goal was to shoot 50-something does in a weekend. Yep. And often they achieved that, you know? And then they didn't touch them.
Guns you trust.
And their managers would say, what I don't want is people nipping at them all the time around the food sources all year long. And they right, wrong, or indifferent, they had great results.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having trusted guns that you can bring in that will help relieve some of that pressure off you and your own, folks is important. And honestly, y'all know this. I mean, you can generate some serious goodwill with people.
Oh, for sure.
Hey, buddy, if you want to come hunt, I will. I'll wine and dine you all weekend. You shoot as many does as you want, as long as you take them with you when you leave.
Yep.
And leave the place good as good or better than you found it. And man, those people realize they can go fill their freezer up in one weekend and stay at a nice camp and have the facilities to take care of the animals after they kill them. Like at our camp, we have some guys do that every year.
That's a hell of a good time.
Your daughter's been begging you to hunt since her little brother shot the big 8 last year. You've ran a fire, dissed the fields, got stuck, got unstuck. Planted food plots, fertilized, and prayed for rain. You moved trees, limbed roads, even bought one of those fancy cell cameras.
So what's your excuse?
LS Tractor.
You mentioned that you're doing that you guys are shooting your bucks by age. What's that age you're trying to get them to?
At a minimum 4. Most of the time we try to let our bucks get to be age 5 if we can. I will actually target some bucks that are 4 if they are really super poor quality. If you look at the science, whitetails have attained 90+% of their antler potential on average when they're 4. So if you've got an animal, I can think of one right here at my house. It's a 110-inch, 8-point, super short tines. He's 4 years old. He's eating a lot of forage every day. I'm not worried about genetics. We can get into that, but the research is very clear on, shooting yourself out, of a genetic mess. That's not going to work. I don't care. I don't want to feed an animal all year that is not at all what we're looking for. But most of the time I'm waiting until they're 5 and then we're targeting them. And some will let go longer than that, understanding that you're taking a huge risk to let a deer age intentionally beyond 5, although we do it, and sometimes it's bitten us and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. So I've got another question here. Lanny, we'll get to your next one after this. But, Mike, I have a lot of guys that tell me that on some pressured properties that they're having luck creating an edge effect on some of their larger food plots. And this edge effect is like we've got this bird blend that we have called Whistleback, but there's some guys, real reputable biologists, that are planting it along the edge in about a 10-yard wide swath. And they're telling me that they're seeing these mature bucks stand in it, waiting on it to get dark. And I'm not trying to promote our product. I'm trying to understand this edge effect. And could you kind of explain what you think might be going on there?
Yeah, I mean, you've got animals that are uncomfortable coming out into the wide open that are going to go stand and survey and see what the playing field is. I've seen this a number of times with bucks that didn't know I could see them, where they're standing up, in the cover, and they may stand there for 5-10 minutes at a time and just stare at deer that are in the plot. That's one of the reasons that, those afternoons when a lot of deer start showing up in a destination plot, that's when my heart rate goes up, because those bucks will stand there and they'll watch other deer and they'll figure out how comfortable they feel walking out into that plot. And if they've got some cover to do that from, I think they're more likely to walk out. I actually have my favorite food plot ever is on a property here at my house. Kind of envision it's a boomerang shape, and in the center of the boomerang is a food plot. It's several acres, and then the ends of the boomerang are, well, this year one of the ends is a combination of soybeans and sorghum. Some years one end will just be fallow. Some years it will be forage beans. Of course, they're super tall at this point. Any scenario you want to think of, but there's cover there. There's stuff for animals to walk out in. They'll actually bed down in it. And they'll come out of the forest and they'll stand there in that edge and just watch. And if there are deer that are out in that plot, particularly if they're deer that are acting up, maybe there's 2 younger bucks that are sparring a little bit, or there's there's a doe that's got a fawn that's kind of cantankerous and he or she is running around, you watch their tails, you watch their ears, they start becoming very comfortable. They're standing there in the cover, they feel safe, and lo and behold, here they come. So I think that's kind of what you're describing is what I often see at that food plot is it may take deer 10 or 15 minutes to get to that plot because they walk out in that cover and they just stand there and they mill around. They'll take a few slow steps. They'll stare, they'll watch, they'll meander to the left and they'll meander to the right. And then suddenly they're on a beeline versus say a food plot where there is none of that. They're either out there or they're not. And, those are the situations where your heart rate, your heart stops because right at dark, here he came. Well, he's been standing there for quite some time in a lot of situations.
Yeah.
And
So-
he just finally felt comfortable.
So you're just basically you're moving the staging area from the woods where you can't
To the
see
plot.
into
Yep.
the plot. And
Yep.
so they're going to stage in that thick area in the plot instead of just sitting there staring, from the woods.
So this was years ago. There's a huge food plot at my camp in Louisiana, and there's a bow stand, a double bow set on the edge of the plot. And imagine a scenario where you've got like a 7-acre food plot, kind of a perfect square, and then on one side of it you have this archery set that's right on the edge. But behind this set is all bedding cover, is all thick, brushy, scrubby. And I cannot tell you the number of times that, and of course we don't hunt the bow set and the rifle blind at the same time, but I can't tell you the number of times that one of our hunters, and in a lot of cases it was Austin, would come out of that stand and say, we had these 2 bucks come up under us. They stood there for like 20 minutes staring out into that field, and then they finally walked out. Or this buck, here's a picture of him on my phone. I took it when he was walking under the stand. It took him 20 minutes to get out in that food plot. He walked back and forth under this tree 5 or 6 times. I can't tell you the number of times that people have said that. And I've seen it myself where they walk up and they mill around, they stand there and just stare holes through that food plot, looking at other animals that are out there. And that's the effect that Bobby's talking about, is just moving that transition where he's comfortable out closer to the food source.
Yeah, so guys, we're doing some food plot architecture. That's something to think about in the future.
Sure. And even if
100%.
your field isn't 7 or 8 acres, if you're surrounded by some adjoining trees, a lot of times it's just a bunch of sweet gums and elms and ashes and things. You could create that thick field stuff further back, in the woods instead of taking up food plot space
Yeah, soften
with
the
some
edges.
hack and squirt or, laying some trees down.
Great for ground dwelling birds too.
Yeah.
So has anybody else got another question? Go ahead.
I got one more. We've talked about before the rut strategies, like post-rut. What are your goals from hunting, and then what are you doing post-rut from a nutritional standpoint?
Well, from a hunting perspective, post-rut, I'm looking at food sources and lack of pressure. Are there particular food sources that these bucks are going to go to where they're more comfortable than others? One, and this, but one thing you see in many areas after the rut is your bucks they end up getting back with some buddies. You may have 2 or 3 bucks that are using an area together. I'm trying to find a reliable food source that is attracting a lot of attention, period, not just from bucks, but a lot of deer activity anyway, because I think those bucks, particularly once they start grouping back up, they just, the safety in numbers kind of thing, go show up where there's some other deer. As far as nutrition goes, honestly, if I've done a good job with my food plots and my deer density isn't so high that they're consuming everything, I'm letting those animals chill out and relax, and I'm trying not to put pressure on them as much, and let them beef back up. It can be a sore subject with some people, but one thing that if a client says, "Hey, what can I do to really improve my deer condition after the rut and as the season's ending?" I have clients that have super high deer densities, and those deer end up in fairly poor condition. Those bucks are run down at the end of the rut. They may feed a protein pellet or something that allow those animals to kind of recover more quickly than they would otherwise. And I see that being particularly problematic after a mass failure. When you've got a tough fall and those bucks are down, they're already going to be down weight anyway, but then they're down even more weight than normal. That may be a scenario to consider if your finances and your ethics, everybody's different when it comes to the supplemental feeding issue, but that's something to consider.
You can't always count on things like those small acorn reds that we love so much that fall through the leaf litter and the deer and turkey scratch them up in the late season. You may not always have a good mast year. And so it's important, to back them up with some good forbs in your early successional habitat. Maybe put some feed out as well, and your food plots that stay green through the winter.
I've seen a lot of really heavy use of plants like turnips and radishes and late season like that, when you've got things are getting pretty tough out there, and they may have laid off of some of those plants earlier in the fall, hopefully, and allowed them to actually grow a bulb and be successful. And then you flip the script to say January or February, and they'll often crush those plants that they laid off of them a month or so earlier.
Yeah, and way up north, they get some snow cover that helps keep a lot of those radishes and turnips longer. It keeps them insulated, and they can paw them up in the late winter.
And we can pull them up, and when you make a neck roast, with a turnip reduction, is pretty good.
Delicious.
Mike is a neck roast guy.
Y'all
He
make
talks
my
about
stomach
neck
growl.
roast all the time.
Oh, I love them. Love a neck roast. Ate it last night for dinner.
They're delicious.
How about that? Well, look, guys, we've asked a lot of questions. Let's turn it over to Matt. Doc, we've got a trivia question for you. So, so one of our listeners that's left a review can win a prize here if you get this question right. So here we go, Matt.
All right, Dr. Mike. So you're playing for SC Turkey Hunter, and the prize is a Gamekeeper field wear wing shooter pullover.
Oh, nice.
So that's guys, probably a South Carolina turkey hunter, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Mike, sometimes these listeners that leave these reviews leave little trick names, and they're just trying to see if we'll say them. And there's been a couple of times we've embarrassed ourselves.
You've embarrassed.
All right, Dr. Mike. So the question is, what are juvenile sandhill cranes referred to as?
And if
Colts.
Oh my gosh,
He
he
nailed
got
it.
that right out of the head.
What did he say?
Colts.
Dr. Chamberlain. Yeah.
Look, here, you can't make this up. You really
Hold on, Bobby. Don't go to a gunfight with a water pistol.
Yeah, that's right.
So the reason I knew that is one of my former students is now a faculty member at Texas Tech, and he does a lot of work on sandhill cranes. And the other day he posted on his social media accounts that they were trapping colts and banding them, and that's why I knew that. I saw his post, and that's super interesting what he's doing, and he's a great scientist. And I saw that, and I was like, that's really cool that they're putting satellite GPS tags on them and getting all this cool movement data, which is right up my wheelhouse anyway. And so that helped me answer that question.
And you probably knew that answer however many years
refreshed-
ago
yeah.
when you were a student.
Yep.
But that's the thing. A lot of these PhDs will forget something because they've learned so much. They may have learned that in a class when they were a freshman.
Well, I thought that was a neat. I've never heard what they were called, and I thought everybody might learn something. So, and I thought we might have a chance to stump you, but I guess not.
Bobby.
It will happen.
Yes.
All right. Well,
But
sausage.
on the other side, if you're having a wildlife trivia pursuit contest, call Doc.
That's right.
a good.
He's definitely on my phone a friend list.
Yes.
Good.
So I got to ask, what we didn't talk about is, and real quickly, we talked about it, but when we were going to do it before, and we talked about it, we're going to do it today, is like, what are his thoughts in developing, obviously, a great whitetail food plot with an eye on turkeys and 365 management. And I'd love to get his thoughts about that as much as all these topics today.
Yeah. Certainly.
Yeah. So when I plant food plots for deer, this shouldn't come as a shock. I'm always thinking about turkeys.
There we go. Man after my own heart.
So I'm thinking a cereal grain, if not two. Wheat and oats happens to be my favorite. I'm thinking about that because I want the green succulent nutrition in the fall and winter, but I also want those senescent seed heads in the spring and summer. I want those stalks standing in those plots in the spring because they're going to attract insects. And I'm always going to add a white clover. I'll often add crimson clover to those plots because then I've got an excellent deer plot in the fall. I've got those clovers carrying good nutrition into late winter and early spring. And then I've got that crimson taking off in the spring that's attracting a lot of insects. If I'm thinking high deer density, I'm planning at a heavy rate, but if it's me and I'm thinking my deer density is appropriate and I'm really concerned about my turkeys, I'm going to back off on that clover rate a bit because I don't want it to be a carpet under that wheat and oats. Young poults aren't moving through that carpet. I want a little bit of bare ground if I can get it. And I also am going to plant those plots, say next month. I'm going to come back in January and I'm going to disc a strip all the way around that plot. I may disc a strip right through the center of that plot. And you're like, what in the world would you do that for? I'm going to stimulate native forbs with that winter disking. I'm going to give my turkeys a transition strip around the outside. I'm going to give them some bare ground, maybe one strip through the center of the plot to really be able to move. And what I've seen with my own two eyes is that really increases the attractiveness of those plots to turkeys.
Wow.
If you can give them those native forbs.
So you're talking, say, a 10, 12-foot disc when you say a disc or two.
Yeah, one pass.
Really, just even rough. If our soil's real heavy clay, would you not break it down to where it's a little more, or do big clods fine too?
I mean, you're going to get some response with the big clods, but if you got a super heavy soil, in your case, you may have to make multiple passes.
Because we've got some sandy loam, which I love, just not a lot of it. And one pass does the trick. So that's a great tip right there. Because
I really like the way that looks in the spring because, and I mean, I've seen it with my own two eyes. I mean, birds will really use that buffer along the edge. It gives them some cover. It gives poults something to hide under. It's different. I mean, if you think about it, we're creating a kind of let's just say wheat, oats, crimson, and white clover. Well, you're creating a 4-species plant community. And while that's beneficial, if you're juxtaposing it to a 20-species native plant community that is attracting a lot of insects and has some structure, then that's even better.
Yep. And
fascinating. Yes.
A lot, when that stuff gets really tall, and this is just my observation, but when it gets really tall and there's a bunch of dew out there in the morning, you don't really seem to see a whole bunch of turkeys strutting around in that super tall clover and stuff.
Yeah. Well, they can't
until it dries off, and they really like those edges. Like Mike was.
It's the sight thing. Like I said, the deer live their whole life about their nose, even more than their eyes or anything, or their ears. The turkeys is all sight, and I'm just thinking how making it more attractive. You think about turkeys being comfortable using it. If you got a clean, at the very first part of it before it grows up. You've got something really clean around it. I think they feel safer there.
I like it.
And even if if the plot gets too tall, you're right. I think they're not comfortable being in there because their protection's gone.
Yeah, walk across a plot like that in a spring morning and see what your feet feel like when you get to the other side. You're soaking wet.
Well, at first in the spring too, if he's done that, it's still real low compared to the other foot part. And so they might be comfortable walking through that strip in the middle and still picking stuff and not having to get out there and get wet. So,
yeah, that's good. That's good.
Great tip.
Yeah. Well, anybody else got anything? We started off wanting to hit that, Toxie. I'm glad you brought us back to us.
Yep.
Mike, you got anything? We want to remind people to watch the video one step at a time. That'll be out. So, but have you got anything else you want to call out?
No, except that it's September, and in some areas it means you're already in a tree.
That's right. It's go time.
Some areas it means you're about to be in a tree, and I've said this on your podcast before, but every time you get in a tree, you better soak it up.
Yep,
that's right. Slow down, take a breath, relax, enjoy it, because before you know it, it'll be over again, and you'll be looking. Now we'll be looking, to turkey season with a fervor, but I'll be wanting to climb a tree a week after I can anymore. So
Bob Dixon used to always say this was the emotional new year for hunting.
Yes.
And it is. Finally just a tad bit of cool weather.
Yeah.
Dove hunters first seasons come in, and bow seasons right here on us. In some states already come in. We've got this. It's exciting. This weekend's our velvet season here. We hadn't had one but once. They just started that last year. But it is, and then
the other day,
that'd be a good title for a song, by the way.
But you could live through February because it's a month from turkey season.
Yeah.
So,
my wife said the other day, she said, "You're in a better mood all of a sudden.
Yep.
There's a spring in your step. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you're running around checking bows, checking this, checking that, getting a blind, getting this, getting that. You haven't slowed down, and you haven't done any work."
Wait a minute. I resemble that remark.
Yeah. So, and what she meant was, I'm really bad about working all the time. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you've been busy all day and you haven't worked. And that's good to see.
That's awesome.
For me, it's when you get home from work, it starts getting dark and you start hearing the geese flying over at night.
Yeah.
You know it's starting to turn fall.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just been like an oven. I hate the late hot summer. And then even then walk out in the garage at 4 a.m. or something, it's just like an oven. And then just in the last week or so, less humidity, crisp. I wouldn't say it's cool, but it's such a relief.
Yeah, your pets start getting frisky
we think
and
it's
running
cool
around.
because it's been so hot.
When you get chills
bump,
I live in the edge of town, but it's in the edge. So, but I can go out. Not now, but for the first week, every morning, if I go out right at daylight, you can hear someone in the distance somewhere shooting doves. It started already. So,
Yep.
Love it.
Well, Mike, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate you, Mike.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, well,
always fun.
I think
it is.
I think everybody knows how to follow Mike on social media. And look, I want to thank everybody for listening to our podcast, guys. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And be sure you subscribe. That helps us. And leave a review. You might win a prize. Mac, thank you for doing your question today. And guys, don't forget Tuesday night's the television show. Last night was Hank Parker. I really enjoyed that show.
Good.
That was a good one.
That's good. Mike, did you get a chance to see that?
I did not. We're only internet-based stuff now, so it's taken some getting used to. I have to do some of my TV watching, if you will, at the office.
Well, get that Friendly app. It's $6.99, and you get the outdoor channel, and you can watch.
I've heard about that. I need to do that.
Yeah, it's really good. You can also watch the Rockford Files. I enjoy that, and Toxie likes Bonanza. That's on there. Gunsmoke as well. So, guys, we really appreciate it. Look, is there anything I'm forgetting, Mac? I'm looking at you. Seem like I'm forgetting something, but I can't think of what it is. All right, so guys, enjoy the season. It's that time of year. Mike, thank you so much. Toxie, appreciate you being here. Lanny, did you get to ask enough questions?
Yes, I did. Thank you for letting me talk.
There we go. All right. Why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.